Good evening. That was a brief glimpse of Alfred Hitchcock's new film Family Plot, which closed the 1976 Cannes Film Festival this weekend. And tonight's programme is by way of an eyewitness report from the desperate battlefield of that selfsame film festival. Well, scenes of frightful carnage there were at Cannes last week, with cinema attendants bitten by irate women and eminent film critics hurled bodily through plate glass windows. But more of this blood-curdling stuff later on, because contrary to popular belief, the Cannes Film Festival is not all riots and fisticuffs and frenzied women with their fangs dripping blood. Films are also shown there, and so I'll be reporting on some of those that competed for the prizes and some of those that did not. In this second category came Alfred Hitchcock's 53rd picture, Family Plot, a comedy thriller starring Bruce Dern as a struggling actor and Barbara Harris as his girlfriend, who also claims to be a medium. And these two involve themselves in the criminal activities of William Devane and Karen Black. In this scene, as we saw at the beginning of the programme, Miss Harris is doing her spiritualist bit. The more chaotic aspects of Cannes this year were caused by the fact that this town of 12,000 people had attracted 35,000 visitors, all of whom seemed to be anxious to see the same film at the same time. Unfortunately, some of the cinema attendants didn't appear to have got it quite clear in their own minds whether they were supposed to be ushers or bouncers, so they reached a somewhat unsatisfactory compromise by combining both roles. Some people they ushered in, the rest they threw out. Hence the amazing scenes of confusion outside the Palais du Festival, with angry journalists and outraged freeloaders shoving and yelling as they were quite arbitrarily refused admission to the films they'd been invited to see. One man was pushed by the crowd through a glass window and another was chucked through a flower bed and into a potted plant. He escaped rather lightly, I believe, but 5 geraniums were mortally wounded and 3 surgeons fought through the night to save the pot plant. However, all this fearful hand-to-hand combat lay unperceived in the future when the festival opened 2 weeks ago with a special showing of That's Entertainment Part 2, being a further compilation of some great moments and some not-so-great moments from old MGM movies, and all introduced by Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly.
They all last, unsurpassed. Here's the cast.
Please let me stay.
I want to be alone.
I was reading a book the other day.
Reading a book?
Yes, it's all about civilization or something. A nutty kind of a book. Do you know that the guy says that machinery is going to take the place of every profession?
Oh, my dear. That's something you need never worry about.
It's a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. It's a far, far better rest I go to than I have ever known.
It's all right. That's in every contract. That's what they call a sanity clause. You can't fool me. There ain't no sanity clause.
You go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Well, as with the Hitchcock film, That's Entertainment Part 2 was also shown out of competition, and I'll have more to say about it in the next and special edition of Film 76. Incidentally, when I talk about competition in Cannes, I should point out that there are actually all manner of competitions. There's the Director's Fortnight, there's the Critics' Prize, and then there's the main competition in which the invited films of various nations wrestle with each other in the quest for the Grand Prix. America had 3 official entries in this section, one of them being Next Stop, Greenwich Village, a soft-centred, semi-autobiographical comedy about a Jewish boy, played by Lenny Baker, who goes to Greenwich Village in the 1950s to pursue his ambition to be an actor, and also to escape the overwhelming affection of his mother, as portrayed by Shelley Winters, burlesquing like mad in a performance which is best described as the kosher equivalent of Ham. It's an episodic but quite amusing picture written and directed by Paul Mazursky. And here we see the parents visiting their son for the first time and meeting his girlfriend.
You, I want to talk to you. Sit down. Sit down. Well, at least you're a Jewish girl, so...
Mrs. Lipinski, Larry and I are not getting married.
No, so then what are you doing?
Not doing anything.
You know, something you think that I was born yesterday.
Hey, none of our business, Frank.
It bothers you I ask you a couple questions, huh? Not really. I'm glad we finally met.
If it was up to my son, would never meet. He's ashamed of me.
No, he's not. He's afraid of you.
Miss, don't be such a wise guy.
Here you are. You want something, pal?
I want to go home. I have to get up early.
I just got my coffee. You want to go home? Lila, I understand you and this pretty young lady. You're...
My name's Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah, you're not getting married, huh?
Where'd you read that? Walter Winchell?
Oh, another wise guy. Am I wrong or am I right?
You're right. Sarah is just my girlfriend.
All right, then, so when are you going to get married, huh?
You don't necessarily get married to your girlfriends these days.
Oh, so who do you marry, your boyfriend? I told you, Greenwich Village is peculiar.
I see where you get your sense of humor from.
I got married, I was 18 years old.
19.
I never knew another man. But in those days, you dated. Then you got engaged and you got married. And there was no hanky-panky in between.
Maybe there should have been.
Hey, Sarah.
I don't know, maybe she's right. Who knows?
The second American film shown in competition was Dandy, the All-American Girl, which was really rather awful. Stockard Channing, who was about the only good thing in The Fortune last year, plays a youthful delinquent who steals and sells cars in order to achieve her own particular American dream, a Dino Ferrari. As far as it's anything at all, I suppose it's an attack on American materialism and the horrors of urban life. The third American offering, Taxi Driver, directed by Martin Scorsese, who also made Mean Streets and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, is a different proposition again. Here is Mr. Scorsese in Cannes talking about Taxi Driver.
Taxi Driver is sort of a return to the type of thing Mean Streets is, but the point is Mean Streets is not, a Taxi Driver is not about Italians. It's about a Midwesterner who drives a taxi cab at night in New York, which is the worst time you can do it. The worst time, any time in New York, night, you know. But it's my favorite time in New York, though, the night. And he drives a cab at night, and he really is sort of like Arthur Bremer. You know the character of Arthur Bremer? The guy who shot George Wallace in America? Sort of like that. He writes diaries, and it has a little to do with political assassination, but really has to do with a fellow who becomes obsessed with something he can't have, which is a woman, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful woman, played by Sybil Shepherd. The cabbie is going to be played by Robert De Niro. And she works for the political candidate. He eventually tries to assassinate the candidate because he can't have the woman, and for many other reasons. If it wasn't her, it'd be something else. She's just a catalyst. And eventually the film, it's sort of a kind of a religious film in the sense that it explodes into great violence, repression into violence, almost like a cleansing, you know? It's going to be a strange film.
Well, Taxi Driver was easily the most impressive of the American entries. The central character, superbly played by Robert De Niro, is a cabbie who is so disgusted by the violence, filth and perversion that he sees every night in the city streets that he begins to regard himself as a kind of avenging angel, chosen by divine providence to clean up the city. It's a hard, uncompromising picture that represents a natural progression from Scorsese's first film, Mean Streets. Jodie Foster, whom you might remember from the television version of Paper Moon, in which she played the Tatum O'Neal role, turns up here as a 12-and-a-half-year-old prostitute whom De Niro tries to rescue from her sordid and tatty trade. Over breakfast, he tries to warn her against her pimp.
Who's a killer?
That guy Sport's a killer. That's who's a killer.
Sport never killed him.
He killed someone.
He's a Libra.
He's a what?
I'm a Libra, too. That's why we get along so well.
He looks like a killer to me.
I think that cancers make the best lovers, but God, my whole family are air signs.
He's also a dope shooter.
So what makes you so high and mighty? Will you tell me that? Didn't you ever try looking at your own eyeballs in the mirror?
So what are you going to do about Sport and that old bastard?
When?
When you leave.
I don't know, just leave them, I guess.
You're just going to leave?
Well, yeah, they got plenty of other girls.
Yeah, but you just can't do that. What are you going to do?
What do you want me to do, call the cops?
Well, the cops don't do nothing. You know that.
Hey, look, Sport never treated me bad. I mean, he didn't beat me up or anything like that once.
But you can't allow him to do the same to other girls. You can't allow him to do that. He is the lowest kind of person in the world. Somebody's got to do something to him. He's the scum of the earth. He's the worst sucking scum I have ever seen. You know, he told me about you. He calling you names. He called you a little piece of chicken.
He doesn't mean that.
You know, that kid makes Tatum O'Neal look like a little girl. As a matter of fact, Jodie Foster, who's now 13, could be seen in 3 films at the festival, 2 in the competition and 1 in the market. The market is where all the business is done at Cannes, with movie moguls buying and selling films and each other. In 2 of her pictures, Miss Foster played a prostitute, and in the 3rd, a vamp. A remarkable achievement, I feel, to be typecast as a hooker at the age of 13. It wasn't like that in Shirley Temple's day. Still, her most agreeable performance was in the most agreeable of her films, Bugsy Malone, which was Britain's official entry in the competition. This is an affectionate pastiche of one of those 1930s Warner Brothers gangster movies, with all the parts played by children, most of whom had never acted before. It was directed, and very well directed too, by Alan Parker. And it was made last year at Pinewood Studios on a set which accurately recreated the atmosphere of a 1930s New York street.
Lousy! Lousy!
I wanted to make a film where the kids were the heroes, and a film where we'd talk down to them, and a film made as well as when we make an adult film, so that when the mums and dads take the kids to the pictures, they won't fall asleep, which is what normally happens, which is what I do anyway. The big problem is obviously the guns, and you can't have a gangster film without guns. And so we invented a thing called the splurge gun, which is a regular machine gun, but it fires a capsule which on impact is like a custard pie. And so instead of St. Valentine's Day Massacre or whatever, we have Custard Pie Massacre. Nobody's ever killed or dead, but they're all splurged and they're out.
Just a bit more. That's it, great. Just say your line to him, please.
The gun captain.
Yeah?
Once they get in there.
Yeah, but what kind of gun?
A big gun captain?
A big gun captain? You've been standing here for 2 hours and you didn't tell me a big gun, you banana brains.
They're no different to adults, actually, in a way. And you have to con them at times. You have to be nice to them at times. You have to be strict with them at times. Generally, the best way is that it has to be fun for them. There are 1929, 1930 replicas of cars. They're all petrol-driven cars to avoid the thing of engines and kids driving them. But to all other intents and purposes, they just look like regular cars. They're just driven by foot power. There are 11 musical numbers, most of them take place here in Speakeasy. We're making a totally American-speaking film, and we happen to be making it here, but I hope that if we make it well enough, the only time that people can think of it as an English film is when they see Made at Pinewood Studios at the end.
Feel the good cheer, like they say in the poem. Fat Sam's ain't humble, but it's your home sweet home. Plans are made dear, things are played dear. I could write me a book. Each night astounds you. Rumors are buzzing, stories by the dozen. Look around your cousin at the news we're making here. Anybody who is anybody will soon walk through that door. At Fat Sam's Grand Slam, Speakeasy.
Well, you might think that a film played entirely by children posing as adults would be utterly insufferable after about 10 minutes at the most. But if so, you'd be wrong. Bugsy Malone is quite charming and beautifully observed, and although the basic theme of 2 gangs, run respectively by Fat Sam and Dandy Dan, struggling for control of the illicit sarsaparilla racket in Prohibition times, is a send-up of the gangster films, the subplots are equally effective, and send-ups of other familiar Hollywood products, such as the Show Business movie and the I Want to Be in Movies movie. The dialogue is splendidly hard-boiled, and Alan Parker directs with a great deal of skill and talent. Jodie Foster is the only professional in the cast, but some of the others are just about as good as she is, particularly Scott Baio as the hero, Bugsy Malone himself, wandering through the film with all the assurance of a cut-down Humphrey Bogart. A joyous little film, and one that made a happy change from the generally heavy stuff in the festival. Anyway, here we find little Miss Foster bringing Bugsy into the nightclub to meet the all-powerful Fat Sam.
Hi, honey. Here he is.
Hey, Bugsy!
How you doing, Sam?
I'm glad to see you. You? Pull up a chair. Fix him a drink, honey.
Thanks, special on the rocks. So what can I do for you, Sam?
Bugsy, I'm in a jam. Dandy Dan's breathing down my neck. At any minute now, he'll take over my entire organization.
You still got all this?
And if Dandy Dan gets his way, won't have a dime for a shoe shine. Tula, could you leave us alone a minute? This man's talk.
That's all right. I'm unshockable.
Go fix your makeup.
I've already fixed it.
Then go make yourself more beautiful than you already are.
You know that that's impossible.
Anything's possible.
All right, I'll go manicure my gloves.
Curiously enough, the festival authorities wouldn't at first accept Bugsy Malone as Britain's entry on the pompous and preposterous grounds that it didn't measure up to the aim of making Cannes the meeting place of the world's best esoteric productions. What a load of rubbish. There's nothing very esoteric about a festival in which every film, even Ingmar Bergman's, is advertised by the free distribution of gaudy T-shirts. Have you seen the movie? No, but I've read the T-shirt. At this point, let's have a look at some of the European entries, and a very polyglot lot they were too. The German entry was made by a French director, the Swiss entry was based on a German play, and the two French entries were directed by Roman Polanski, who comes from the well-known French city of Warsaw, and Joseph Losey, a native of the even more famous French city of Hollywood, California. Roman Polanski's film The Tenant was originally made in English, but was shown at Cannes in a dubbed French version, which made the performances of Shelley Winters as the concierge and Melvyn Douglas as the owner of an apartment house somewhat difficult to assess. Polanski himself plays the tenant who takes over a flat whose previous occupant, a girl, had committed suicide and becomes obsessed by her personality and what he believes to be the hostility of his fellow lodgers. Polanski says it's a film about anguish and the xenophobia of the French. He said this at a press conference, at which there was a large dog asleep on one of the chairs. Shelley Winters says the film is a remake of Rosemary's Baby, with Mr. Polanski playing Rosemary. Well, whatever it is, I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I look forward to seeing it again in the original English version. Bernardo Bertolucci's film 1900, his first since Last Tango in Paris, was the talking point of the first week of the festival. It stars Robert De Niro again, and Burt Lancaster, among others, and it tells the social and political history of Italy with a very left-wing slant in not much less than 5.5 hours. It had come and gone by the time I arrived, so I had no chance to see it. But the last I heard, Bertolucci was resisting all efforts to cut it down to 3 hours on the grounds that this was insupportable censorship and a denial of freedom of speech, and no doubt we'll hear much more of all this in the months to come. Another film shown out of competition at Cannes was the last picture by the Italian director Luchino Visconti, a 19th century tale of love and jealousy and lovers and mistresses, made with all the supreme elegance that was Visconti's particular contribution to the cinema. Brief musical moment there from Visconti's last film. Oh, I meant to tell you, it was Roman Polanski who told me that one of the cinema attendants had been bitten by a furious lady whom he was trying to eject. And those attendants were also foolhardy enough to try to keep Shelley Winters out of the showing of The Tenant, in which, of course, she appears. Now, Miss Winters is a large lady and a determined one, and trying to keep her out of a place she wants to get into demands the reckless courage of a kamikaze pilot. But to return now to the cosmopolitan nature of the European films, the official Yugoslav entry, Private Vice and Public Virtue, is actually an Italo-Yugoslav co-production. Mr. Klein, a French film made by the American Joseph Losey, got a pretty cool reception by and large at the festival, mostly I think because it deals with the French treatment of Jews during the Second World War, a subject on which France generally is still highly sensitive. It deals with a Catholic from Alsace called Mr. Klein, who exploits Jews trying to flee the country, and who himself becomes confused in the official mind with another and Jewish Mr. Klein. Alain Delon plays the title role in a film that combines reality with a Kafkaesque kind of fantasy. His performance is very good indeed, although the film itself is not entirely convincing. On the other hand, the washed-out colour and the atmosphere of Paris in the early 40s are splendidly evoked, and I think this is certainly Joseph Losey's best picture for some years. In this scene, Mr. Klein only reinforces official suspicion of himself when, at least in part unintentionally, he persuades a girlfriend to play a piece of prescribed music.
Marche militaire?
La façon dont tu la joues, ça peut être n'importe quoi.
Maintenant, au premier.
Mais arrêtez!
Tu es devenue folle ou quoi?
what you need.
The general impression I received from what I saw and heard was that the films this year were worthy and earnest and pretty heavy going, Bugsy Malone excepted. If Robert De Niro's was, in my view, the best performance by an actor that I saw, the best by an actress was Liv Ullmann's in the Ingmar Bergman film Face to Face, again shown out of competition. Typically harrowing Bergman stuff, this. The study of a woman going through a breakdown. It was made originally as a 3-part series for Swedish television, but it cuts together most effectively as a film. There's nowhere to go for a laugh, mind you, but Miss Ullmann is very impressive indeed. Here she is, after a suicide attempt, trying to reassure her daughter.
Du, skulle inte vi kunna ha en middag tillsammans, du och jag? Du passerar ju här på vägen till Skåne. Kommer till stan på eftermiddagen och sen går inte dit tåg förrän i 10-tiden. Vi kunde ha middag och sen gå på någon bio. Skulle inte det vara trevligt?
Jo, mamma. Kommer att göra det där en gång till?
Nej.
Hur ska jag veta det?
Ja, du får lita på vad jag säger.
Men vet du vad du säger?
Ja, jag tror det.
Men du är inte säker?
Vad är det du vill egentligen? Begriper du absolut ingenting?
Du har i alla fall aldrig tyckt om mig. För det är sant. Jag måste faktiskt sticka nu.
Liv Ullmann as anguished as only she can be. So what else did Cannes offer? Well, there was Mr. Jarvis Astaire, the noted boxing promoter representing the interests of Dustin Hoffman. Whether Mr. Astaire landed some good roles for his client, I really couldn't say, but I expect he fixed him up with a couple of good fights. And then there was Sir Lou Grade, as he then was, standing by the sea at the Eden Rock Hotel and announcing another ambitious programme of forthcoming British productions. Rumours that Sir Lou had walked from Cannes across the water can be discounted because those who were there insist that the Mediterranean simply parted to let him through. And finally, of course, there were the prizes, handed out by a jury that was headed by Tennessee Williams and included Charlotte Rampling. And here indeed they are. The Best Actor award went to the Spaniard José Luis Gomez in Pascual Duarte, a story about pre-Civil War Spain. The prize for Best Actress was shared by Dominique Sanda, who in the Italian film The Inheritance plays an adventuress in Rome at the turn of the century, and Marie Torocik in the Hungarian film Mrs. Dairy, Where Are You?, in which she plays a 19th century actress torn between her career and her husband. Ettore Scola was named Best Director for Ugly, Dirty and Mean, another Italian entry about the ups and downs of family life in the Roman slums. The special jury prize was again shared between the Spanish entry Cría Cuervos, directed by Carlos Saura and starring Geraldine Chaplin, and Eric Romer's German entry, The Marquise of O. And finally, the Grand Prix went, deservedly, I think, to Martin Scorsese's powerful film Taxi Driver, starring Robert De Niro and Sybil Shepherd.
Dear Father and Mother, July is the month I remember which brings not only your wedding anniversary, but also Father's Day and Mother's birthday. I'm sorry I can't remember the exact dates, but I hope this card will take care of them all. I'm sorry again I cannot send you my address like I promised to last year, but the sensitive nature of my work for the government demands utmost secrecy. I know you will understand. I am healthy and well and making lots of money. I have been going with a girl for several months, and I know you would be proud if you could see her. Her name is Betsy, but I can tell you no more than that.
Hey, you can't park here. Come on, let's go, move it.
I hope this card finds you all well as it does me. I hope no one has died. Don't worry about me. One day there'll be a knock on the door and it'll be me. Love, Travis.
The winner of the Grand Prix, and not a mention of Bugsy Malone. Shame. And so once again we say farewell to Cannes, the fights and the riots, the champagne parties on the beach, the general chaos, the sun-kissed boobs, and of course the films themselves. It was fun, but I don't think I could stand it more than once a year. Next Sunday sees the last programme in this series of Film 76, and we'll be devoting it to a review of That's Entertainment, Part 2, and to interviews with some of the people who are in it, people like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse. Till then, here's a last glimpse of Cannes 1976, an extract from a short film animated by Antoinette Starkowitz and with music by Richard O'Brien. It's called High Fidelity, and it's British, and I don't know whether it's as esoteric as the festival organisers might have liked, but it is rather enjoyable. Good night.
So hit the high and hit a high note too. I'm too highly strung to hide my love from you. I would hire a choir to sing higher and higher. Hi, babe, it's high time we hit the high light. I'm a high-class highbrow with my high school friends from high society. And you love only me in high fidelity.
10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3.
That's entertainment. Rhythm. Music. My gal, who could ask for anything more?
Good evening. This is the last in the present series of Film 76, an occasion of much sadness, I may say, for me, though of course I can't speak for anyone else. But to mark this final programme, we'll be concentrating on That's Entertainment Part 2, MGM's sequel to its original widescreen clip show. More specifically, however, we'll be concentrating on some of the people who are in that film. People like Katherine Grayson, the reluctant movie star, Sid Charisse, the dancer whose legs begin just below the ears, Donald O'Connor, and whatever did happen to Donald O'Connor, Johnny Weissmuller, the greatest Tarzan of them all, and Marge Champion, the prettier half of Marge and Gower Champion. Most of all, though, I'll be talking to the two men who must surely be everybody's favourite musical stars, Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. They're a little gnarled and wizened now, perhaps, and their toupees are thinner than they were. But as we saw briefly at the beginning of the programme, they're still a very sprightly pair as they link the various excerpts in That's Entertainment Part 2. Curiously enough, and in my opinion sadly enough, this is, as I pointed out, the first time they've danced together since Ziegfeld Follies 30 years ago.
Was it 30 years ago?
30 years ago.
Boy, time flies. You say why we have never danced together since? Well, there were various reasons, I suppose. When we were at Metro at the same time doing separate films, he always had something to do, a lot of things to do, and I did too, and they took a lot of preparation time to get them, and somehow or other, nobody came up with a story or said, gee, how would you guys like to do this, or we'll want you to do it, or anything, because I don't think they even put one together.
May I add to that also that I secretly suspect, and I certainly can't write it in blood, that the studio was I know, as Fred just said, we're working separately. He'd be teaming up with Sid Charisse, and then I'd be with Judy Garland, and he'd be with Judy Garland, I'd be with Vera Ellen, and then he'd have Sid Charisse. So they're making twice the money out of us. And I think the studio had financial secrets on their mind. And, of course, I never liked Fred, so that was another reason.
Well,
But you both danced extremely well in the links in That's Entertainment too, but I gather that at the beginning you didn't intend to dance together, did you?
It was always in the offing somewhere that we couldn't just stand there. They think we'd have fallen arches or something and couldn't move, I don't know. But so we decided that we had to move around a little bit and indicate and throw it away and kid around because we couldn't want to or didn't want to go into any extensive routine because there's so much other of that in the picture anyway, and furthermore, I'm too old to do it.
As Fred said, we had to do some kind of movement. We couldn't just stand there and talk like a stand-up comic. That's not our métier. So we did a few little things, but we certainly didn't try to compete with ourselves 10, 20, 30 years ago. That would have been foolish.
And now, as we carry right on, we call upon charming Leslie Caron. Anywhere you can watch Fred Astaire. That's entertainment. A scene played by Judy and Jean. It's a song that goes winging along. Garbo's dance has a touch of romance. That's entertainment. The show must go on is the show business cry. But there's always someone who wants to know why. With Robert Taylor, we'll try to come up with an answer. It's Eleanor Powell, the dancer. More in store. The world is a stage. The stage is a world of entertainment.
Who was the boss of you two? I mean,
he was my boss until I punched him in the nose. And
yes.
You know that didn't hurt.
Fred, it's very difficult to work with Fred because he's very, very physical and he punches you a lot, especially the girls he hit a lot. No, the producers who put the film together, who edited it, were in charge of the film. All we did was put in a little glue.
So who adjusted to whom when you were doing these links? Because presumably one of you had to adjust to the other.
I can't take many deep bows for directing Fred Astaire in those few little steps we did. The fact is, and I may sound immodest, and if so, let it be, that we have enough expertise to adjust our styles one to another. But if a step, an enchaînement phrase, so to speak, didn't fit one or the other of us, we'd get another one.
Working in unison is one of the toughest things you can do in dancing. And if you've had a lot of chorus training as in the chorus, I never was in the chorus, and Gene was not in the chorus either. To get those two things to look as if we were together, and then there were other things that we didn't have to be exact unison. But to work together, to gel together, that took some rehearsing.
Well, it's true enough, I suppose. The steps they did were not too strenuous, and the limbs were a little stiffer, and the bones creaked a little more than they used to do. But after all, Fred Astaire is 77, and Gene Kelly is 64, and I should dance so well at their age. I should dance so well now, come to that. What, though, of the film itself? Well, I enjoyed it rather more than the original. That's Entertainment Part 1 was made up entirely of clips from musicals, and after a couple of hours of that, I felt as if I'd eaten a 4-course meal that consisted entirely of profiteroles. Part 2, on the other hand, includes a variety of other goodies as well. Gable's famous farewell to Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, the marvellous cabin scene from the Marx Brothers A Night at the Opera, Garbo wanting to be alone, not once but half a dozen times, an amusing send-up of all those travelogues that invariably ended with a solemn commentator intoning, "And so we reluctantly say farewell to Tokyo, to Venice, to Hawaii, to Athens, to Barnsley," and so on. There is, in fact, a welcome touch of self-mockery in Part 2 that was missing from Part 1. Still, let's now get back to the musical numbers and the beautiful and almost indecently long-legged Cyd Charisse. You're one of the few who's actually danced with both Astaire and Kelly. Obviously very different styles. How did they compare?
Well, yes, I've been very fortunate to dance with Mr. Astaire and Mr. Kelly, and you just absolutely cannot compare the two. First of all, they're two entirely different personalities and entirely different styles, and it's like they're both so great in their own way that there's no way you can compare them.
What about your career outside dancing, did you regard yourself primarily as a dancer or as an actress who danced?
And I really wanted to be a ballerina, and of course the war came along and interfered with that, and I wound up in California auditioning for my first audition, as a matter of fact, was to do with Ziegfeld Follies with Fred Astaire, but such a small role. I didn't dance with him, I danced beside him. And I went to see Arthur Freed, the producer, about it, and he said, would you like a 7-year contract, Sid? And I didn't know what it meant, because I really intended to be a ballet dancer, not to be in movies at all. So I had to start learning to act once I signed at Metro, which in those days they did. They taught you acting and singing and so forth.
Does it seem to me that you didn't actually have an awful lot of luck with your straight acting roles? Would that be fair?
Well, I had a few that were not too bad. Tension, 2 Weeks in Another Town. There were quite a list of them. And I enjoy acting. But once you're put in the mold of a dancer at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in those days, you were automatically put into many, many musicals. And that was my fate at Metro.
Tell me about the part in the film. You're in... It's a scene from Silk Stockings, isn't it, with Astaire?
The one with Fred, yes.
Yes, yes.
Well, it was a remake of Ninotchka. Do you
yes,
remember
indeed,
the film?
yes.
And, of course, it was a very stoic kind of a character I was playing. But it was a very good role. I enjoyed doing it very much.
Sid Charisse. Lovely Sid Charisse. How she dances. This is from Silk Stockings.
Not bad. I don't wish you to feel that I have any particular axe to grind on behalf of That's Entertainment Part 2. In many ways, indeed, I agree with those critics who complain that it's less well organised than its predecessor, that some of the inclusions are hardly worthy, and that the whole thing was probably put together with an eye on the marketplace, rather than in any great spirit of tribute to MGM's more glorious past. Nevertheless, I found the constant switching from musical to non-musical sequences refreshing and entertaining, even though they cropped up in a somewhat haphazard pattern. Equally, I was glad to see tribute paid to the monosyllabic Johnny Weissmuller, who was quite the most satisfying of all the 14 or 15 Tarzans there have ever been, and who at times seemed almost as human as King Kong. Among those Tarzans, Mr. Weissmuller had a unique contribution to make, as we discover in the following conversation. You certainly were the first Tarzan, but you were certainly the best Tarzan, and you were the first speaking Tarzan, if speech can be
We had an awful time. We had an awful time trying to get some dialogue that goes, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, you know, and I always hit Jane. She says you're hitting me too hard.
You spent practically your whole screen career playing Tarzan, didn't you?
Yes, we did. I started in 1930, and I'm still doing them. And I did Jungle Jim for another 10 years.
Did you mind that, or would you like to have gone on and done other things instead?
No, I had a ball. I liked it. I liked the animals. The animals seemed to like me. And we got along very well. Nobody ever bit me or something like that.
They dare. You're a big fella.
I bite them back.
What have you been doing since you stopped making the Tarzan and the Jungle Jim films?
I'm home. I live in Fort Lauderdale. I run the Swimming Hall of Fame in Fort Lauderdale.
Ah, well, yes, I can't think of a better man for it.
I beat up all those little kids and make them learn how to swim.
What about that Tarzan whoop? Can you still do it?
Oh!
Jane. Pause it. 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 Jane.
Oh, please stop.
Johnny Weissmuller positively acting his head off as Tarzan, and now 72 years old, would you believe? I make no apologies, incidentally, for the fact that this is by way of being a kind of geriatric show, because the veterans we have here are all in their own ways unique and certainly unrivaled by any performers in the movies today. But for some of those MGM musical stars, particularly those who were coming up in the 1950s, midnight chimed and the coach turned back into a pumpkin. Remember, for example, Donald O'Connor, that very talented comedian and dancer who starred in 40-odd movies and seemed destined for a lengthy and splendid career until everything more or less stopped around 1957. He's now 51 and trying to make his way back to the top again. His rendition of Make 'Em Laugh was one of the highlights of Singin' in the Rain back in 1952, but that was included in That's Entertainment Part 1, and in Part 2 he appears in a truncated version of one of the lesser numbers from Singin' in the Rain, a song called Good Morning, which he performed with Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds.
Good morning, good morning. We've gabbed the whole night through. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Nothing could be grander than to be in Louisiana in the morning.
In the morning, it's great to stay up late. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Might be just as zippy if we was in Mississippi.
When we left the movie show, the future wasn't bright. But came the dawn, the show goes on, and I don't want to say good night.
Don't say good morning!
Good morning!
Rainbows are shining through.
Good morning.
Good morning!
Bonjour.
Bonjour!
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias!
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno!
Good morning.
Guten Morgen!
Good morning to you.
That was a tough one to do. It really was. And they just show one small portion of it, because each of us, in that particular number, I played a matador in one sequence. I mean, in the progression of the number. Gene did something else. And they just show a little bit of it. And then they pull away from it. I don't understand that. I don't really agree with that one, because the number in its entirety was too good, and they shouldn't have cut away from it. They should have stayed with it.
This may sound rude, it's not intended to be, but what happened to Donald O'Connor? Because around about that time, Singing in the Rain, you were on the way up. They were the next generation after Kelly and Astaire. And then it stopped. What happened?
I'll tell you why. I made the Buster Keaton story. And I loved Buster so much, and he loved me. And when we made the picture, it was a fabrication. And I got so teed off, I said, well, that's it. That's it. That's the end of it. When it's allocated to somebody else, I said, from then on, either I will do my own things, and I won't perform for anyone else. So that's, and also, you know, I work in Las Vegas, and I travel around the world performing. I've had, let's see, I'm on my 9th comeback.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How did the others go?
Very well. I don't know about this one, but the other ones went beautifully.
Well, I can only hope that comeback number 9 goes as well as the other 8 and lasts a bit longer. One of MGM's biggest musical stars in the 40s and early 50s was Kathryn Grayson, a singer who actually started her screen career in 1940 at the age of 18 as one of Andy Hardy's casual girlfriends, than which there can hardly be a more humble beginning. But then, as she explained to me, she didn't really want to be in the movies in the first place.
I had no intention of going into films because I was really very seriously studying for opera. So I went to MGM with my teachers just as a lark, you know, and just to shut them up. So they sent a limousine for my mother and father to sign the contract, and I've been motion pictures ever since.
Well, you did retire from movies early, didn't you?
No, not really. No, well, they stopped making the plush musicals, that's all. They couldn't afford the plush musicals, and that was the type I had been doing.
Well, here's that Louis Mayer was an awful monster who treated people very badly.
If you were a lady, he treated you as a lady, and if you weren't, he treated you the same.
Oh, that sounds fair, doesn't it, really?
I think so.
Looking back on the films you made at MGM, it seems to me that you quite often had rather silly roles to play. Is that fair? Did you ever try to get better ones?
Oh, yes, that was one of the main contentions there. One of the things I wanted most was great stories with great music, and I think that they can be made, and maybe someday I will produce them.
But you didn't feel that that's what you were doing?
No, because somehow they felt that if you had music, the story was inconsequential, you know.
You may not have had particularly good roles to play or lines to deliver, but you did have some very good songs to sing, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
As in, as we saw in Entertainment 2, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
I think there were more exciting things I did in films than Smoke, but I enjoyed that.
Ask me how I knew my true love was true.
Jerome Kern wrote some of the loveliest melodies I've ever heard, and none lovelier than this one, sung by Katherine Grayson and danced by Marge and Gower Champion.
Cannot be denied. They said someday you'll find all who love are blind. When your heart's on fire, you must realize smoke gets in
I had not seen the number between the time it was made and now, because for some reason that's one of the films that was not released to television. They've released all the others, so I've seen all the others, but not that one. And there she is, you know, floating around. I liked it.
You said once that you felt MGM had too much of everything, too much money, too much talent, and that was MGM's problem. I don't see how that can be a problem for a film studio.
Sometimes I think a sparseness, I mean, being a little hungry, makes creativity come out. Now, that wasn't always the case at MGM. The abundance of money and talent, of course, created some unforgettable pictures. But there are a lot of films that were not represented in either That's Entertainment 1 or Part 2, which I think there was a substitute for talent.
Your career as a choreographer seems to have blossomed in the last few years, since, in fact, your divorce from Gower Champion.
Yes.
Were you then overshadowed by him when you were married and were working together?
I didn't think of it that way. We always planned for him to become a director. That's what he wanted to do. And we very consciously used the team and the team identification as a stepping stone toward his career as the director and director-choreographer. And that seemed fairly okay with me. I didn't have any particular drive or need to do that.
A couple of quick back references to all the foregoing. An example of Marge Champion's choreography was that little dance step which Burgess Meredith executed so well last year as a door-to-door salesman in Day of the Locust. And if you're wondering why Katherine Grayson is a rather more substantial lady than she used to be, well, the reason is that she was asked to put on weight for a TV series she's making in America. I would never have dreamed of asking her about it, you understand, but in fact she volunteered the information. And so back to That's Entertainment Part 2. I found the Astaire Kelly links, despite the banality of the commentary and the lyrics they were called upon to sing, far more agreeable than the links in Part 1, when wonderful, wonderful people like Frank Sinatra and Elizabeth Taylor kept cropping up glutinously to tell us about all the other wonderful, wonderful people who made those wonderful, wonderful MGM musicals. Part 2 doesn't quite have the courage to admit that some of those musicals were actually lousy, though indeed they were, but it does have enough of its tongue in its cheek to take the mickey out of the likes of Clark Gable and Robert Taylor, and Saul Bass's credit titles are a little satire in themselves. I would say, if you can follow me, that the parts of Part 2 are not as good as the parts of Part 1, but the whole is finally more enjoyable. However, you may be wondering how anyone goes about selecting clips for such a mammoth clip show as That's Entertainment, and so I asked that question of the two producers, Daniel Melnick and Saul Chaplin.
Painfully.
I imagine it must have been.
What we did is we started with a large frame of reference and started pulling numbers, just going through the movies. I think we went through a total of 285 films, old films, to find the numbers. We just pulled the numbers in toto, all the ones that we thought were really superlative.
Whose idea was it then to get Astaire and Kelly to do the links?
Well, we did know very early that we're not going to repeat what was done in the first one and having many stars introduce the numbers. We knew we were going to use as few as possible. And then
I think that was a good idea.
Well,
it worked out.
It worked out, I think. You know, having Gene and Fred, of course, was marvelous.
Well, in all those numbers in That's Entertainment too, there was one that made my legs ache just watching it, and that was Bobby Van jumping up and down along the street in Small Town Girl.
Busby Berkeley did that number, and they went out on the street where the number had to be done, and Busby Berkeley said, well, let's see if we can find something that Gene and Fred have not done on this street already, you know. So his first idea was for Bobby Van to do cartwheels. Well, Bobby said, look, I can't do cartwheels down this many blocks. He says, all right, I'll think of something else. He says, I've got it. Jump. He says, what do you mean jump? He says, just jump, up and down, jump.
Bobby Van says it took his leg muscles a year to recover from that sequence, and I can well believe it. But what was interesting about talking to all these veterans, if they'll forgive the term, is that none of them seemed to have any nostalgia for their more illustrious past. They just accepted, I think, that the age of the big screen musical was over and time had moved on. I did, however, put one question to all of them. How do you feel when you look at those clips and see yourself as you used to be?
Scared, because he was a young, thin fellow.
That was another lady. And I think she's quite good.
I loved every minute of it.
I just look back at all the happy times we had and enjoy it all over again.
Very rewarding, especially when you can see how well some of them hold up after all these years.
Yeah, I sometimes feel that it works and it's good, but film is not a dancer's medium to begin with, and you have to make the dance fit the film.
When I see myself as before, I certainly am not sad, and I'm pleased that it still holds up, and I say, my goodness, we really got around. Then I see myself now, and I honestly think I look like a little old man dancing out there. I mean it. And I had an uncle whom I adored, and he wasn't a dancer, but every time I see this, I see myself. It goes, Uncle Henry. he's doing my stuff. No, I'm not kidding.
Well, God knows how old Fred Astaire's Uncle Henry must be, but if he can still dance like Fred, he must be quite a fella. Anyway, that's all for tonight, and indeed that's all for the series. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. And on that slightly melancholy note, I can think of nothing more appropriate to leave you with than one of my favourite moments from That's Entertainment Part 2. Maurice Chevalier and Hermione Gingold singing I Remember It Well from Gigi. Good night and goodbye.
That carriage ride.
You walked me home.
You lost a glove.
I lost a comb.
Yes, I remember it well. That brilliant sky.
We had some rain.
Those Russian songs.
From sunny Spain.
Yes. I remember it well. You wore a gown of gold.
I was all in blue.
Am I getting old?
Oh, no. Not you. How strong you were. How young and gay, a prince of love in every way.
Oh, yes. I remember it well.
Good evening. In this first programme of the autumn, we have a whole batch of new films, such as The Shootist, which stars John Wayne, and Murder by Death, which stars practically everybody else. We also have Picnic at Hanging Rock, the best Australian film I've seen yet, and The Omen, which is both a kissing cousin of The Exorcist and the latest box office blockbuster. In addition, there's From Noon Till 3, Charles Bronson's venture into Western comedy. And as to that, we'll be hearing some comments on the picture from Mr. Bronson. A rare event because he's usually even more monosyllabic off-screen than he is on, and also from his wife and co-star Jill Ireland. But let's begin with John Wayne and The Shootist, which is about the last days in the life of a notorious gunfighter. It begins with this resume of The Shootist's previous busy career.
His name was J.B. Brooks, and he had a matched pair of .45s with antique ivory grips that were something to behold. He wasn't an outlaw. Fact is, for a while, he was a lawman. Long before I met Mr. Brooks, he was a famous man. I guess his fame was why somebody or other was always after him.
My word, what a life. All go, isn't it? I don't know how many of those films you were able to identify, but what that montage brought home to me was the fact that John Wayne is a man who never really grew up. He's been playing cowboys and Indians all his life. Anyway, in The Shootist, he rides into Carson City on the day Queen Victoria's death is announced to consult his old medical mate, Doc James Stewart. And the result of this toupee-to-toupee confrontation is as follows.
Well? Books, every few days I have to tell a man or a woman something I don't want to. I've been practicing medicine for 29 years and I still don't know how to do it well.
Why don't you just say it, flat out?
All right. You have a cancer. Advanced. Is that what that fellow up at Creed told you?
Yeah.
You didn't believe him?
No.
You believe me?
Can't you cut it out, Doc?
I'd have to gut you like a fish.
And so the rest of the film deals with the last few days of our hero's life as the creaking but still game-old gunfighter moves into Lauren Bacall's boarding house and sets up his date with destiny before he goes to that great shootout in the sky. It's an affectionate, nostalgic and rather moving little story, skillfully directed by Don Siegel, he who made Dirty Harry and Charlie Varick. And it's more than just another examination of the gunman who's outlived his time. It's also a kind of homage to old Duke Wayne himself, a man who's bravely and successfully fought against lung cancer and who is certainly the greatest gunfighter in the entire history of blank bullets. And perhaps because the story is a kind of distorted reflection of his own life and career, Mr. Wayne comes perilously close to acting. It's a splendid performance anyway, far better than the one in True Grit, which won him his Oscar. And, of course, he's well supported by Lauren Bacall as the widow woman, who, despite her distaste for the shootist profession, becomes grudgingly attracted to the man himself.
John Bernard, I'm going to send Reverend Saunders to see you tomorrow.
No, thank you.
Maybe it'll make it easier for you.
No.
Just for a few minutes.
Bond, I'm tired of people pawing over my death for this reason or that or for any reason. A man's death is about the most private thing in his life. It doesn't belong to Dobkins or Reverend Saunders or Thibodeau or you. It's mine.
I suppose that's true of your soul, too.
My soul is what I've already made of it. You reprimand me for making judgments with a gun barrel poked in my face, but it's all right for you to judge me on hearsay.
But the hearsay fits.
Maybe I'm better than you've already decided. Maybe I'm no worse than that good reverend you're always bragging about.
Or maybe you just like being a gunman. I suppose you prefer the word shootist.
I don't think of myself as either.
Oh, no, you're some godlike creature of infinite knowledge, aren't you?
I'm a dying man, scared of the dark.
Damn you. Damn you for the pain you've brought into this house.
Well, by marked contrast with all the foregoing, Murder by Death is a sad disappointment. A splendid idea, I'll grant you that, but executed in a style which manages quite remarkably to be both frenetic and leaden at the same time. The screenplay, by Neil Simon incidentally, is a send-up of the great detectives of fiction, all of whom were invited by an eccentric and venomous millionaire, an embarrassingly gauche performance by Truman Capote, to solve a murder that's not yet been committed. Well, so far not bad at all, and the scenes in which the famous detectives are introduced are pretty good fun. But after that, the strain of keeping 10 noted actors and Truman Capote fully occupied proves too much both for Neil Simon and the director Robert Moore. And though the plot, and particularly the ending, contains more red herrings than you'd find in the hold of a Russian trawler, I found it very difficult to care. As for the cast, well, we'll come to them in a minute. For now, let's see them all sitting round the dining table waiting for midnight to strike and the murder to be committed.
All right, everybody take your seats.
I'm scared, Stan. Hold me.
Hold yourself, I'm busy. Take the same seat you had before.
40 seconds. I'm very worried about Monsieur Perrier.
I'm going to look for him. No, sit, please. No one to leave room. Push the other door.
It's locked. I can't open it.
Hurry, man. We have 15 seconds.
Move your hands, chauffeur.
Don't ask me.
What are you doing in the butler's uniform?
I said don't ask me. I don't know. It all happened too quickly.
The cook. Where's the cook?
She's gone. Never said a word. 10 more seconds. Quickly, sit and join hands.
Impossible for murder to happen now without witnesses.
3, 2, 1. It's over. We're safe and sound. Ah, that's probably the cook. Come in.
Darling, the poor woman is stone deaf.
I'm sorry. I forgot. Come in!
As a matter of interest, it wasn't the, in this case, blind butler who did it. At least I don't think it was. They might have been. But it was certainly the blind butler who copped it, which is a great pity because Alec Guinness, who played that part, gave quite the best performance in the film. However, let's get on to the detectives. First of all, there's Peter Sellers as Sidney Wang, a wily Oriental much given to sub-Confucian aphorisms, and not at all unlike Charlie Chan, as portrayed in the 30s by the Swedish actor Warner Oland. Then there's Peter Falk as Sam Diamond, who's not too far removed from Sam Spade and giving a very good impersonation of Humphrey Bogart in The Maltese Falcon, except that Diamond turns out to be a closet queen who was picked up by the Truman Capote character in a gay bar. Doesn't Neil Simon have any respect for our cinema traditions? Elsa Lanchester crops up as Dame Jessie Marbles in what is actually a grotesque misreading of Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, and doesn't really deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Margaret Rutherford, who created the original character. And finally, we have David Niven and Maggie Smith and an unidentified dog portraying Dick and Dora Charleston and their terrier Myron. In this burlesque of Dashiell Hammett's Thin Man characters, Nick and Nora Charles, not forgetting Astor, Miss Smith was delicious but largely wasted, and David Niven hardly registered at all, because the role he filled was exactly like any other David Niven part in any other film. Indeed, I kept thinking wistfully of William Powell and Myrna Loy, who created the famous Charles couple in the Thin Man series in the 30s and 40s. As a matter of fact, Myrna Loy, who's now 71, was asked if she'd like to play the part again in Murder by Death, but declined on the grounds that the script was a little risque. Oh, if only it had been. A touch more naughtiness and downright bad taste would have helped to while away some of the tedium. Still, here is Myrna Loy with Mr. Powell in the original Thin Man.
Well, where do you think you're going?
I'm going to take Asta for a walk.
Well, he's just been for a walk.
Well, we're going sightseeing, aren't we, Asta?
What's that?
That's known in burgling circles as a flashlight.
Nick, what are you up to?
Hey.
What is this?
Looks like a holdup.
What are you going to do?
I'm going down to Winans' shop. I want to find out why it's closed.
Well, why wouldn't he close it? He went away, didn't he?
Well, he went away lots of times when I knew him, but he never closed the shop. I get a hunch.
Do you think he's hiding there?
I don't know, but this thing's giving me the itch. I'm going to find out.
Nick, I won't have you going down there.
Hey, it was you that got me into this.
Well, I know, but this is different. He's a crazy man. He might kill you.
He won't kill me. I've got Asta to protect me.
All right, go ahead. Go on, see if I can. But I think it's a dirty trick to bring me all the way to New York just to make a widow of me.
You wouldn't be a widow long.
You bet I wouldn't.
And not with all your money. Well, any port in a storm. Goodbye, sugar.
Nicky! Nicky!
Huh?
Take care of yourself.
Oh, sure I will.
Don't say it like that. Say it as if you meant it.
Well, I do believe the little woman cares.
I don't care. It's just that I'm used to you, that's all. If you let anything happen to him, you'll never wag that tail again.
And after that, let's have a look at Neil Simon's broader and less sophisticated 1976 version. Dick and Dora Charleston arriving at Truman Capote's mansion.
What is it now, Myron?
Up there, Dora, look. A blind butler.
Don't let him park the car, Dickie.
Good evening. We have been expecting you. We let ourselves in, thank you. Dick and Dora Charleston. Good evening. We have been expecting you.
Your room is ready, if you'll just follow me, please. Oh, don't mind him, ma'am. It's just the cat.
We left our luggage in the trunk.
I'll get it later, ma'am, when I park the car.
Was that Mr. Wang's car I noticed out front?
Yes, they're resting now in their room. I have taken the liberty of putting you in the same wing as Mr. Wang.
Oh, isn't that nice, darling? We're in Wang's wing.
Not many people come to the manor these days. It's nice to hear guests again.
Thank you. You are?
Benson, ma'am.
Thank you, Benson.
No. Benson, ma'am. My name is Benson, ma'am.
Benson, ma'am?
Yes, sir. James, Benson, ma'am.
James, sir?
Yes, sir.
James or Benson, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Howard.
My father's name, sir.
What was your father's name?
Howard. Howard Benson, ma'am.
Your father was Howard Benson, ma'am?
Leave it be, Dickie. I've had enough.
A few more scenes like that, and I might have taken a kinder view of Murder by Death. Still on the subject of comedy, and Murder by Death can loosely be so described, you don't, I think, normally associate it with Charles Bronson. Bronson's the outstanding example of the currently fashionable impassive school of film acting. Clint Eastwood's another of the breed. They each have this uncanny ability to get through an entire film without moving a single facial muscle, rather as if they've been cobbled together by some Hollywood Frankenstein from a job lot of old cigar store Indians. But in From Noon Till 3, in which he co-stars, as usual, with his wife Jill Ireland, Charles Bronson has a plucky stab at giving a light and humorous performance. However, before we go into that, here he is with Miss Ireland, talking about the film in America to Bob Hart.
Your newest film, From Noon Till 3, it's a comedy western and, in a sense...
Don't tell us what it is. We'll tell you what it is. You just ask the question. It's not a comedy western. It's a tragic comedy, which is the most difficult thing in the world to write. Yes. And Frank Gilroy, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote this thing, and it's a beautiful piece of work. Don't misunderstand me. It's not a comedy
Well,
western.
it's not like Mel Brooks' comedy western.
Of course not.
You know, that would be misleading.
It's
People
not
would be
satirical.
disappointed if they thought that.
It's not farcical. It's
It's
a
not a tragic,
tragic comedy.
The humor comes out of the situation, but it's not played all the way through for comedy, although you couldn't take it all seriously either, so kind of balance is somewhere in between.
What attracted you about the script, Charles?
The fact that it was a tragic comedy and well written. And it was more or less a two-character show, which I hadn't done for I don't know how long. It's not populated with too many people, too many characters. And it was a comment. There is more to this story that Frank Gilroy knows and Jill and I know and Mike Frankovich knows than people that have seen it. Now, I know you have seen it. But this is the epitome of chauvinistic pig, as they put it today.
He plays a real chauvinist.
This is the epitome of it. You know what I think?
No, and I don't care to.
I think you already have a plan. I think you expect company. I think you expect them to knock on the door any moment. And you're just play acting with me until they do.
Think what you wish.
I don't just think it, I know it. You know how I know it? You're blushing. Your cheeks are turning red.
Be still.
Beet red.
Shut up!
Getting redder all the time.
Oh!
Oh! What are you doing?
Making sure you don't have any other weapons.
If you're so depraved you'd inflict your desires on an unwilling body, then proceed.
Well, then the story, briefly up to that point, is that Bronson's part of a gang that's going to rob a bank. But as he's had a premonition that the whole dubious enterprise is going to end in an unscheduled disaster, he emulates the Sunday newspaper reporters and makes an excuse and leaves, spending that idyllic and randy afternoon with the overheated widow, Miss Ireland. Nevertheless, through a chapter of accidents, he's arrested by the posse and sent to prison. And while he's there, Miss Ireland turns their sexy afternoon into a best-selling book, a top 10 disc, and a record-breaking play. So that when he's finally released and goes in search of the lady again, he finds he's quite unable to live up to his own legend. Nobody will even believe that he is who he is. Nobody, that is, except a bunch of certified lunatics. It's a very interesting idea, and it has, as we can see, a fair quota of comic moments.
Oh, no!
No what?
No love-making.
Why not?
Because if we make love, we'll never be able to say goodbye.
We don't have to say goodbye. We're going to Boston, remember?
That was before, when it was just the two of us. Now we have all the others to consider.
What others?
All the people throughout the world who have been affected by our story.
Oh, who gives a damn about them?
I do. And so would you if you'd read some of these letters I've received. From as far away as Japan, saying how much my story, our story, has lifted their hearts.
3 cheers for the Japanese. Now, come on over, lie down, and let's get on with the reunion.
Don't you see?
No?
You and I have become more than ourselves. Being more than ourselves, we're obligated to subordinate our lesser selves to our greater selves.
You must be talking Japanese. I haven't got the foggiest notion what you're saying.
What's interesting about the film is that it gives Miss Ireland, a British export to Hollywood, a rare opportunity to show that she can act quite nicely. And there's also a curious fascination in watching the normally menacing Mr. Bronson trying his hand at what one might describe as high Western comedy. It's a bit like watching the Mount Rushmore carvings capering about in a song and dance act, or having your executioner telling you the latest Irish joke before he pulls the lever and sends you dangling into space. But it's a worthwhile experiment for all that. Still, I don't think Mr. Bronson means to carry this comedy lark too far. I don't think, for instance, that he sees himself as a natural replacement for Cary Grant. Here he is, anyway, talking, among other things, about his next project.
The White Buffalo is about the pursuit of a white buffalo, and the character I play is Wild Bill Hickok. And it's the time of his life, of course, when that you have never heard about nor seen on the screen before, but happened in reality. Not maybe the white buffalo portion of it, but his going blind and his having nightmares as a result of having had untreated venereal disease. And it was shortly before he was shot in the back of his life. And in the course of the story, he has one friend who was a white man, and that later in the story becomes an enemy because he becomes a friend of a red man, which is unheard of in those days. While Bill Hickok and the red man become very fast, good friends.
You choose to spend a certain amount of your year away from Hollywood, away from the glitter, the glamour, away from your Bel Air home in Vermont, I believe. Why is that?
I'm not truly a city boy. I don't like cities. And I wasn't born nor raised in a city, and I've always found myself going in and out of doorways. And I think that's ridiculous. That's a lousy life.
Well, I must say the White Buffalo doesn't exactly sound like a barrel of laughs. And incidentally, it won't be seen here until next February because the producer, Dino De Laurentiis, has ordered some dramatic new footage involving a mechanical giant white buffalo, at which prospect the mind boggles and even threatens to seize up entirely. On then to Picnic at Hanging Rock, an Australian film now on view in London and which deserves to be seen by a far wider audience. Till now, the Australian cinema has been obsessed, more or less exclusively, with its own genitalia, but Picnic at Hanging Rock takes it confidently into the adult world. It's directed by the very promising Peter Weir, who also made another notable Australian film, In the Cars That Ate Paris, and it's based on a legend. The publicity material insists it's a true story, but actually it's only a legend, about two schoolgirls and their teacher, who round the turn of the century vanished while on a school picnic at Hanging Rock, a volcanic hill a few miles outside Melbourne. Peter Weir treats it beautifully as a mystic tale, leaving the audience to decide for itself whether he's dealing with reality or some strange fantasy that stems from the adolescent yearnings of young girls. The film is superb to look at and directed with great confidence, and though the end is a little unsatisfactory, as all unsolved mysteries must be, the images are vivid and powerful enough to keep you thinking long after you've left the cinema. Good performances, too, by Rachel Roberts and Dominic Guard, both imported for the occasion from this country, and also by a talented young Australian actress named Helen Morse, of whom I trust we'll be hearing more. Here, though, is the moment when Dominic Guard and his coachman notice the schoolgirls crossing a creek at the start of their fateful walk.
Some of them are real lookers. Have a look at the shape of the dark one with the curls. Built like an hourglass. I never go with the last one, the blonde. Oh, she'd have a decent pair of legs. All the way up to her bum.
I'd rather you didn't say crude things like that, Albert.
I say the crude things. You just think them. Miranda! Take my word for it. The Sheilas are all alike when it comes to the fellas. Doesn't matter if it's a bloody college you come from or the Ballarat orphanage where me and me kid sister was dragged up.
I didn't know you were an orphan.
Jeez, haven't thought of that bloody dump in donkey's years.
I think I'll just stretch my legs a bit before we go.
Another recent film with a distinctly mystic element is The Omen, about which I expect you've heard a great deal, and which is now on general release. It involves Gregory Peck as the American ambassador to London and Lee Remick as his wife, and the pair of them, illicitly and innocently, to say nothing of improbably, adopt the infant son of the devil. This latter character is played by a brooding child called Harvey Stevens, who looks as if he's got a lot on his mind, which, considering the mayhem he induces, is probably not far from the truth. The film's really a sort of son of Exorcist, but without the sexual writhings and the spewing forth of overboiled spinach, and despite several absurdities, is very well handled and played with great presence by the two stars, and even more so by Billy Whitelaw as a terrifying handmaiden of Old Nick. Here, anyway, is a sample of the action, the moment when it first becomes apparent that the little devil Damien has a somewhat drastic effect on the people around him.
Holly! I'll take him, Mum. No, I'll take him. Come on. Let's go.
Put him on the table.
Damien. It's all for you.
Richard Donner, the director of The Omen, claims it's really two stories in one. For the less sophisticated, it's simply an eerie tale of satanic possession. And for smarter people, like you and me, of course, it's not about the supernatural at all, but about a form of madness that attacks both Mr. Peck and Miss Remick. But I reckon that's just a cop-out by a director who, not satisfied with having made a very competent and extremely lucrative movie, wants intellectual applause as well. Take my word for it, it's a film about satanic possession, and as such it's been quite remarkably successful. In America, as well as being critically acclaimed, it took around $50 million in 3 months, and in this country, in one West End theatre alone, it took almost £50,000 in 7 days. Now, what's interesting about The Omen is that it's technically a British picture, having been made by a British crew on location in Surrey last year. But because the finance came from a basically American company, all it did for the British film industry was to provide work for a few months for about 100 people. Now, why couldn't a totally British company have put the money up and watched all those lovely dollars come pouring back over here? The infuriating aspect of British film production is that in every department we have as much talent as there is to be found anywhere else in the world. But with the notable exception of Lord Grade, and to a more modest extent Michael Klinger, we have nobody with the courage to put his money where his mouth is. If the success of The Omen can persuade investors to be a little bolder in future, it will have done a great service to the indigenous movie industry, and I won't begrudge a penny of the money it takes back to America. On that subject, there's a certain irony in the fact that while our commercial movie business is waning, there's an ever-increasing interest in filmmaking among the younger generation, especially now that many schools and colleges have pretty comprehensive film courses. Last night, as an example, there was a screening at the National Film Theatre of an event called Let's Make a Film Festival, which consisted of movies made by school and college students around the country. Here's a brief look at one of their offerings, an 8mm film made by 11-year-olds at a Middlesex school. Right, so Eisenstein it ain't, but it's not without promise. And nor are the 10 best amateur pictures selected by Movie Maker magazine, which are now on tour around the country and can be seen by audiences in Hull, Leeds and Sheffield in the next couple of weeks. One of them's a rather good animated short by Sheila Graber called Michelangelo. And so for this week I'll leave you with a glimpse of that and the mildly depressing thought that without a little courageous investment, none of these gifted amateurs and students will ever amount to anything more than just gifted amateurs and students. Oh, there is one other thought that occurs to me. If Elizabeth Taylor really does marry John Warner and follows the American habit of adding her husband's names to her own, she'll be known henceforth as Elizabeth Taylor, Hilton, Wilding, Todd, Fisher, Burton, Warner. Try getting that on a marquee and see how you make out. Anyway, here's Michelangelo. Till next Sunday, good night. Good evening. Tonight we have a report from the film festival at Tehran, the city where the motor car rules, OK? And the open season for pedestrians lasts all the year round. Richard Lester's new film The Ritz was shown there in competition, and a British feature about the Winter Olympics called White Rock had its premiere in the documentary section. Meanwhile, back in London, where by comparison with Tehran you hardly notice the traffic, the London Film Festival ended tonight with a preview of Mel Brooks' new comedy Silent Movie. And I'll be showing a clip or two from that and talking to the manic Mr. Brooks himself.
Thank you, Barry. I think that you have a modicum of good taste in having me.
Yeah, well, I don't know about good taste. Masochism, more likely. Anyway, we also have two more new pictures, I Will For Now, featuring Elliot Gould and Diane Keaton, and Obsession with Cliff Robertson and Genevieve Bujold, which can be seen in the West End and on general release, respectively. But let's begin with the Tehran Festival and the Ritz, which in the curious way of the cinema was a British entry because it was made at Twickenham Studios, although the director, the writer and the stars were all American, and the setting was as alien to the British as it must have been to the Iranians, a homosexual sauna bath in New York City. It's based on a successful Broadway play, and it's totally dominated by the glorious Rita Moreno as a third-rate cabaret artist with the thickest Puerto Rican accent this side of San Juan.
And nothing's gonna stop us till we're through. Suddenly everything's come.
But briefly, the plot of The Ritz is that Jack Weston is fleeing from a mafioso brother-in-law who's trying to kill him, and unwittingly takes refuge in a gay sauna bath where Rita Moreno is the resident entertainer, though it's only fair to say that the clientele also find alternative and doubtless more intimate ways of entertaining themselves. It's a comedy, and a very funny comedy indeed, of errors and misunderstandings and mistaken identities. To add to his other problems, the plump Mr. Weston is pursued by a chubby chaser and also by a heterosexual detective who has the misfortune, given the circumstances, to have a very high voice indeed. There's one splendid moment when the murderer's brother-in-law turns up and orders all the clientele to leap into the swimming pool with the memorable line, "I don't want to see a dry fairy in the house." It's a slick, fast-moving, affectionate and occasionally hilarious picture, and a good deal of that hilarity comes from Rita Moreno, otherwise known as Googie Gomez, star of a record-breaking bus and truck tour with Fiddler on the Roof. Miss Moreno is that rare kind of comedienne who can still remain marvellously desirable even when she's murdering the English language, singing off-key, or gamely carrying on with her dance after she's lost a shoe. As I was saying right at the beginning of the programme, the traffic in Tehran has to be seen, heard and smelt to be believed. It's a city of 5 million people and 2 million cars, where the air pollution is well above danger level, and you wake in the morning to the gentle sound of the birds coughing. Nevertheless, and without benefit of oxygen mask, I accosted Richard Lester, the director of the Ritz, in the street, and asked him how he thought the Iranian audience had reacted to gay American humour and Rita Moreno.
I think Rita was a great puzzle for them. I feel that she may have caused some trouble in America in terms of comprehension, but in Tehran, I don't think she got quite the response that she would have hoped in her life. Jack Weston always looked like he was about to do something funny, so people really understood that it was funny. And I think the gratitude when there was a piece of visual comedy came up, when someone could see an object dropping to the ground, there was such a relief that one got enormous audience response. I don't think that those gags will get that kind of response in any other country.
As for the festival itself, well, the turnout was pretty good. Richard Lester was there, of course, and so were Rita Tushingham and Richard Johnson, to say nothing of such Americans as Sally Kellerman, Lauren Bacall, Diane Cannon, and that irascible director Otto Preminger, who distinguished himself by eating a 3-course meal that consisted entirely of caviar. There was, in fact, one other evening when Mr. Preminger drew attention to himself, and that was when he threw a rather impressive tantrum on being told that he would have to travel to the festival opening by bus rather than by private limousine. But actually, when you looked at the traffic congestion, travelling by bus, which is what everyone was reduced to, made a great deal of sense, because that way, at least, we all arrived late together. And indeed, so busy was the festival that if you were exceedingly unlucky, you could actually arrive late for 5 different films at the same cinema in one day. Altogether, 500 pictures were on view from 74 countries, although not all of them, of course, were in competition. In fact, the movies were divided into 5 separate categories. There was the competitive bit, with the Winged Ibex Prize for the winner. There was the Festival of Festivals, which was a sort of pick of the best of films shown at other festivals this year. And there was a tribute to Federico Fellini. Then there was a retrospective of the work of Buster Keaton. A review of 50 years of Iranian movies, most of them short documentaries, was called Our Magic Lantern. And as a somewhat bizarre touch, under the heading Oriental Cinema, came a selection of films from that well-known land of inscrutable Orientals, Australia. What's particularly encouraging about the Tehran Festival is the degree of local involvement. Over the fortnight, it's reckoned that around 500,000 people will have seen the 500 films on offer, and they seem quite resigned to queuing for anything up to 4 hours. Well, mostly it was the men who queued, either through chivalry or because women's lib has gained far more ground in Iran than one might have guessed. Women, incidentally, tend to be quite spectacular, especially if your taste happens to incline towards elegant creatures with blue-black hair and eyes like Bambi's. By and large, the festival organisation ran pretty smoothly, although Tehran is perhaps too overcrowded in any case to be an ideal site for a film festival. And in fact, there's talk of moving the whole event to the country's former capital, Isfahan, which is a far more beautiful city and has the added advantage of possessing air which you can actually breathe. Meanwhile, back in smoggy old Tehran, the documentary section of the festival was called The Cinema Has Eyes and Ears, a philosophical statement to which nobody could take much exception, and it included a preview of The White Rock, a feature-length British film by Tony Maylam and Michael Samuelson about this year's Winter Olympics, with commentary and participation by James Coburn and music by Rick Wakeman. Well, Brian De Palma's film Obsession, which is now on general release, was made as a kind of homage to Hitchcock. It's particularly reminiscent of Vertigo, and it's a mystery thriller in which Cliff Robertson's wife and daughter are kidnapped and killed. Well, this naturally leaves him very upset, until years later he meets Genevieve Bujold, who looks exactly like his dead wife, which is not altogether surprising, since Miss Bujold plays both parts. So he takes up with her, and then the violent events of 15 years previously begin to repeat themselves. I shan't say any more because it is, after all, a mystery and not at all a bad one, although the denouement is quite preposterous. Mr. De Palma's direction is crisp enough, the late Bernard Herrmann's music is splendid, and Miss Bujold is rather toothsome. Mr. Robertson, however, looks less like a man with an obsession than a man who's constantly wondering where he can have left his front door key, which makes empathy rather difficult. In this clip, Cliff Robertson is in Florence, just getting to know the dead ringer of his late wife.
It's my heart, and afterwards, don't sigh. You know, as a child, I used to go to the church where Dante came to watch Beatrice. Beatrice, la bella donna, would sit here with her father. And there, come here, over there.
I'm her father.
No.
No?
The young Dante, 23 years old,
No.
would stand and watch Beatrice. And here, in between, sat the lady of the screen. A lady Dante pretended to love so that Beatrice would not be embarrassed by his continual gaze. You still love Elizabeth, don't you? That's why you want me. How did she die?
I killed her.
Well, at this point, I thought it might be quite useful to give a swift roundup of some of the new films which will be opening in London, and in some cases other cities as well, around Christmas time. Rita Moreno, for instance, can be seen in the Ritz on December the 16th, on which date Peter Sellers will reappear for positively the last time, it says here, as the inept Inspector Clouseau in The Pink Panther Strikes Again, a sequel to the hugely lucrative Return of the Pink Panther. The new one is set in, among other places, the White House, and once more involves Herbert Lom as Clouseau's long-suffering boss. Two other big-budget pictures also open on December the 16th to catch the pre-Christmas trade. One is Marathon Man, a thriller directed by John Schlesinger with Dustin Hoffman as a college student mixed up in the nefarious activities of a Nazi war criminal played by Laurence Olivier. And the other is The Scarlet Buccaneer, in which Robert Shaw, rescued presumably in the nick of time from the jaws of Jaws, which was where we last saw him, turns up as a swashbuckler. Those of you with a taste for total violence will no doubt be interested to learn that on Boxing Day, Clint Eastwood can be seen in The Enforcer, which is a sequel to both Dirty Harry and Magnum Force, and need I say more. Nor is that the end of the riches that are on their way, because by the end of the year, or very soon afterwards, we're promised not one, not two, but 3 screen versions of the famous Israeli raid on Entebbe. Also on Boxing Day comes King Kong, a lavish remake of the 1933 classic, starring Jeff Bridges and introducing one Jessica Lange in the famous Fay Wray role. Here's a quick preview of what the biggest monkey in the world gets up to. I don't know about you, but I really can't see that relationship working out. The London Film Festival ended tonight after 3 very successful weeks on a budget about 1/10 that of the Tehran Festival. Reasonable enough, I suppose, when you reflect that Iran must have just about all the money in the world and we haven't got any. The film that closed the London Festival was the Mel Brooks comedy Silent Movie. Apart from the background music and one word spoken by a most unlikely person, a silent movie is exactly what it is. Apart from that, it's a sort of one-man band, really, with Brooks directing, taking a hand in the script, and playing one of the three leading roles, along with Dom DeLuise and Marty Feldman. In addition, a number of extremely well-known people crop up, mostly guying themselves in cameo roles. Well, Mel Brooks was in London recently, and I asked him where on earth he'd got the idea of making a silent movie in the mid-1970s.
The idea came from a chap by the name of Ron Clark. Ron Clark has written a play called Norman Is That You, together with another guy called Sam Bobrick. It's a success everywhere, except the West End and Broadway, but it's been running all over the world. And Ron said, why don't you do a silent movie, Mel? And I said, I've just done Young Frankenstein in black and white, and now you want me to do a silent movie. The next thing will be just sitting for stills, you know? I mean, I can't keep going backwards, Ron. So he said, no, 1976, a movie about a movie in color. I said, I said, maybe we won't make the movie, but I'd love to tell the executives at Fox and see their faces just to get them all together and say, well, this is my next film. It's a silent, you know? And he said, well, that could be, well, why don't we do that? That could be the movie about going to an executive and you know, getting his reaction. So I didn't intend to make the movie, but I did want to have that meeting with 20th Century Fox and all the executives. So we did have the meeting, and I said, I'm going to make a silent movie in 1976, a silent movie. And they went, 20 minutes they went. They didn't want to say no, they didn't want to say yes, they didn't want to hurt my feelings, they didn't want, you know, it was terrible. And I just waited, you know. And then finally he said, well, what would it be about? I said, I don't know, it would just be silent. Could you be more specific, you know? And then I told them that maybe we would do it with stars. And they said, oh, well, that's something. What would it cost, you know? And they came around and finally.
Yes, how did you persuade people like Burt Reynolds and Liza Minnelli and James Caan particularly? How do you persuade them to send themselves up?
You threaten them. You say you'll send people to their houses late at night and hurt them. And then they say, oh, I'll do the picture. No. Actually, Burt Reynolds is a very good friend of mine. And a very good friend. We couldn't have been in the shower together for 2 days like that, you know. And we were at a party together. There's a lot of drinking and a lot of eating and drinking and champagne. It was just Burt and me, nobody else. And so I said to him, you can laugh. So I said, I told him about the idea. And he said, gee, that's crazy. Silent movie. Then I told him the idea we're going to have some stars. You know, and he said, could I be in it? And I said, well, I'll get back to you, you know. We did most of our own stunts. We absolutely did. Burt Reynolds is a great stunt man. And it was a great stunt standing in the shower for 2 days with the three
You did
of
it
us.
well.
Yes.
What are your criteria for the gags you throw in? Because sometimes one does get the impression that if something occurs to you as being funny, you bung it in in the hope that somebody will laugh and that somebody's going to laugh at a lot of it, if not at all of it.
What we like to have the audience feel is a spirit of improvisation and a kind of a silly camaraderie on the screen. And actually everything is very carefully worked out because writing costs nothing. So you can write and get down to details. But filming costs a great deal of money. You know, it's $30,000 a day to film. So we do improvise, but within scenes, because you can't relocate sets and things like that. Within the scenes, we do improvise. What cost the most money in silent movie was falling down, because quite often the cameraman, the operator, would topple off the camera. He liked, you know, something struck him funny. And the grips would drop lights, and I would fall down. And every time Dom DeLuise or Marty, well, I couldn't look at Marty, you know, through the whole movie. It was very difficult. You know, the best way to hide from Marty Feldman is to get right up, touch his nose, get right close to him, because he can only see out the sides. He'll never see you.
Yeah, well, that trio of you and Marty and Dom DeLuise, that's obviously a kind of tribute to the great comedy trios of the past, is it?
Yes.
They were your heroes, weren't they, all
yes.
those silent movie
yes.
stars?
Well, Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges and the Ritz Brothers, I don't know if you ever heard of the Ritz, but were absolutely my favorite funny people. And I love them. And here was a chance to do something like that. We never did a bit. We never stole a bit from any silent movie. And there were many I wanted to. But we never stole a bit. But what we did steal was, I guess, the sense of artlessness and guilelessness and innocence, sweetness. That we took that flavor was, we were wonderfully stupid, I thought.
I assume Anne Bancroft did the part because she sleeps with the director.
she did the part.
Because you told her to.
Because I
Mrs.
said...
Brooks, you
yes,
said.
I said, Mrs. Brooks, if you say no to this, there'll be wife-beating in this household. As a matter of fact, she was the only tough one. She said, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? I said, a good dinner, a good bottle of wine. You know?
But all
Maybe
those
we'll go
indignities
somewhere.
heaped on her for a good bottle of wine, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
She's amazing. I mean, my wife can sing very well. She can dance very well. And her secret weapon was the fact that she could cross her eyes one at a time. And
Yeah,
when
that
she
was
did that,
genius. Yes.
when she did that in front of Marty really fainted. You know, he couldn't believe it.